Good afternoon and welcome to the World Affairs Council's late afternoon seminar on refugees and resettlement. Just a few comments about the World Affairs Council. We are a non-partisan, non-profit organization, and we try and link St. Louis with the rest of the world. And that means that I always say, we're the make love, not war organization here, a bunch of aging hippies. Anyway, we run a number of programs that do connect us with the rest of the world. Probably the principal one is the International Visitors Program, IVLP, which we run in conjunction with the State Department's Global Ties organization. And we bring people from all over the world to experience our world-class universities, our entrepreneurial activities in Cortex, agricultural work at Danforth and Bayer. So we recently had a group of Indian information technologists on agriculture here, and they went down to Colombia, visited, and went to various companies in St. Louis. We also run a free program called Great Decisions in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association. And that is being sponsored in the prize. Thank you for the University of Missouri for doing that. We hope that that's going to continue. We also run a program for high school seniors, which about something like 30 schools participate in each year. And the winning team goes to Washington, D.C. for the national finals. And we've done pretty well over the years in that program. We have an international connection speaker series, and we recently ran a seminar like this on cybersecurity. This late afternoon activity, we have almost 50 people here. This is our largest audience in a long while since before COVID. So we're really pleased that so many people, and we're also welcoming those who are online with us. We are talking about refugees and resettlement today. And I happen to think it's a very important thing. There's a lot, as you know from the news, there's a huge amount of people displaced around the world. And often their lives are under threat. The ones that we're going to be talking about, over the years, we've brought in tens of thousands of Bosnians. They're very well settled. They form their own community. They're doing well within that, and they're making a contribution to our city. So the two speakers that we have today are Betsy Cohen. And Betsy, after she finished a long and prestigious career with Nestle, she wanted to take on this new position as the executive director of Mosaic. And she's been very active and has built a team of volunteers and grabbed me a few weeks ago. So I'm going to be involved with Mosaic from now on. And those people that are coming here are helping our economy grow. And Mosaic's been very active. We are a proactive city for bringing refugees and immigrants to our city to help it grow. And we realize that can have a major economic impact on it. Our other speaker is Ari Obenson. And Ari has recently stepped into, metaphorically, Anna Crossland's huge shoes after 40 plus years and that's a huge pair of shoes to step into. And he is now the president and chief executive officer of the International Institute, which helps to get people resettled. So one of the things that we're all trying to do is to help, you pass the book quickly, and we're helping people to come here, but not to be a burden on an economy, to help us become working tax-paying citizens. And Betsy wrote this book, You're Hired. I'm sure she'll mention it again. This is about how a refugee comes and starts from ground zero, nothing. And that's what America is being built on. So I'll say no more. I will let our two speakers get on. I think you're going to find this very enjoyable. And those of you who are here will have an Afghan meal with wine at 5:30. So salivate now. Thank you, Betsy and Ari.
Great. Well, I will just give a little brief introduction and Ray will, and then he'll take the first question about the Bosnian and what that's meant for us starting. And we'll go back and forth because I've had 10 years in this role and Ray has had a year, almost a year in his senior role. So we do a lot that's very complementary. As John was saying, after my career, I became a full-time employee of the World Trade Center of St. Louis, which is part of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, which is our regional city-county economic development organization. And I was hired because Anna Crossland, Bob Fox, the World Trade Center, other leaders had done research that said our region has under 5% foreign-born people when the national average is 14%. Kansas City has 9%. Chicago's got 22. And the question was, how do we market and attract St. Louis to attract more foreign-born people? And I was a marketing person who worked with international people, had a lot of regional connections. So it was very apparent that, you know, I would be able to help us market. So I'm a 3-person team, and we are really we're a marketing team of 3 who work on attracting people. We work nationally, we work with other cities. We have a number of programs that some of you in the room are involved in that involve helping international executives and their spouses and partners. We work with immigrant entrepreneurs. I work with 17 universities with their international students. How can we help their international students connect with our businesses and advise them? And we work with families that are relocating, and we work with immigration lawyers. And we also, where we have certain abilities, we work with the International Institute kind of as first cousins because they're a big agency. We're a 3-person marketing team. And so that's what's important because people sometimes think we must be doing the same. So I work for the World Trade Center of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. And our goal is that we want our region to be the fastest growing major metropolitan area for foreign-born people by the year 2025. And a couple years ago, we were doing that. We were gaining, particularly because we're very good with international students and refugees. And as you know, in the past administration and COVID, all those things came to a halt, whether it's consulates around the world, refugees, students, and now we're back rebuilding. But we'll talk about that. So I'll let Ray introduce himself a bit more and start off with kind of what the Bosnian situation started for the region and formed a groundwork for all of us to build on, because it's been a very powerful base that a lot of our new immigrants and refugees find important, and it's also part of the welcome of our region.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you to talk a little bit about the work that we do at the International Institute. Well, the International Institute of St. Louis has been around since 1919. And, you know, there are great similarities between 1919 and the times we're living now. 1919 was at the end of the First World War, but it was also the year after the great pandemic, the last pandemic that the world saw. But there was something going on here in St. Louis, which was, you know, so many men had gone to war and hadn't come back. And so there was obviously a shortage of in the labor force. So many women had come from Eastern Europe, fleeing persecution in Europe, and had moved into the St. Louis area. And so the Institute really started around trying to provide English language classes for these women so that they could integrate the workforce here. And with that, the Institute saw a lot of other opportunities of working with new groups of people, new arrivals in this community, so that they could find a pathway to prosperity within the community. And over the years, it has been different generations of people that have come to St. Louis, and the International Institute has been there to support them. But since 1979, the International Institute became a refugee resettlement agency meaning that we as a refugees are different from immigrants in the sense that refugees flee their country as a result of war or persecution to another country, and in that other country they are registered. Sometimes they stay in what they call refugee camps, as they're labeled as refugees by the United Nations agencies. And then a host country, with the 13 countries in the world that have agreed to accept refugees, and the United States is one of them. And so those people come to the United States as refugees. And so since 1979, the International Institute has been in partnership with the federal government in resettling refugees here in St. Louis. And, it's been different generations over time. People have come from different parts of the world. We saw the Vietnamese come, we saw the Bosnians come, Syrians, and now we're welcoming Afghans and Ukrainians. But it's not only these countries that we know in the headlines, but there are also people coming from other countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Bhutan, from Nepal. We have, not in the numbers that we've seen, the Bosnians or the Afghans, but St. Louis, unlike most cities that have resettlement agencies, we have a wider diversity of people that come here. Whereas if you look at agencies like ours in Minneapolis, for example, they specifically have people from Eastern Africa, and so they almost seem to be uniquely skilled in those particular groups. Whilst here in St. Louis, we have a diversity in arrivals. And as we talk about, which I know we will talk about the Afghans, but as we talk about the Bosnians, it is said that the largest Bosnian community outside Europe is here in St. Louis. And that's a result of the work that was done here in the 90s. The International Institute itself at the time only resettled about 1,000 Bosnians, but because they were able to build a community here, because they felt welcome in this community, because they had opportunities in this community, they were able to attract other Bosnians from different parts of the country. That ignited a secondary migration of Bosnians into St. Louis, in particular the South City, where they settled. And then for generations, they've actually built that community. So the success was actually the success of the community. As a community, the more welcoming we are to people that come here, word somehow goes around, and that eventually begins to attract other people into the community. Would you like
Yeah,
to add something?
the Bosnian story, and I just want to amend the number that Array gave you. The Institute did about 1,000 a year over 9 years. So they resettled about 9 or 10,000, and then another 9 or 10,000 came of secondary migrants from other places. So there was we think there were about 20,000 at one point who were born here, and then they have marriages, children, grandchildren. And so the number of people in the Bosnian community is probably 40 to 50,000, but there's a myth at 70,000, but it's probably 40 to 50, but that's not all born in Bosnia. But it includes their whole community. So there are a number of things. Mostly they were Muslim. Mostly they looked white, which was a big advantage for them in our community because they have that advantage of skin color, which is something that all of our refugees, some do and some don't. But one of the reasons they were successful was their skills, their resilience, their community, and their ability to fit in and be very hardworking. And because they were so successful, I've worked leading the Mosaic Project 10 years. And if I say I work on immigration, every single person goes, the Bosnians did well, the next group will do well. Everywhere you go, if you say you work on immigration, the Bosnians did well, the next group will do well as well. And we've also seen that when the Syrians came, and now with Afghan people who are Muslim, we as a community, when some other communities had a lot of pushback, because our community was we have a lot of different mosques with a lot of different communities, including the Bosnians, but because we had welcoming of Muslim people, that has been a good ground setting for us because we've welcomed others. So I think that there's a lot to be said for what that did for us as we now have had other waves of immigrants who have come, particularly as we now have welcomed so many Afghans through the International Institute. And as Array will mention, the Ukrainians who are not coming that way at all, they're coming with private sponsorship. And I'll let Array talk about that. And then we'll talk about some other of the ways that we're helping them socially, culturally, and in the workforce, where I get more involved with some of his clients and families.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So now since August last year, well, if you went back, John mentioned that I feel big shoes. I said when I started out, Anna said to me, it's going to take a while for you to understand this resettlement cycle. 2-3 years, you will get it. Little did we know that Kabul was going to collapse and that we would have a flood of Afghans coming into the community. And if we look back at what had happened in the previous administration and the last 4 years, the capacity of organizations like ours that were resettling people across the United States had been significantly reduced because the number of people that were coming, either as refugees or other forms of immigration, had also significantly reduced. In fact, it is said that about 300 agencies like ours across the country had to close down in those years. And here we had in the last 4 years, barely gotten up to about 470 arrivals. And in August, we started to prepare ourselves for an avalanche of arrivals, to the extent that in the month of November alone, we welcomed 254 people. There was a week in which we welcomed 150 people in 1 week. Now, think about 4 years, 470 people, and 3 months, 575 people, 74 people. It was a huge undertaking. Now, with every refugee arrival, we have 90 days within which to resettle them, 90 days to find housing, 90 days to put the children in school, 90 days within which to get the adults in the family working, 90 days to do a medical assessment within the family. We provide mental health support. So many things have to happen in 90 days. And one of the challenges that we face in this community, the big challenge is housing. I always say to people that good quality and affordable housing you can't put those together. So under normal circumstances, without an avalanche of arrivals, we would get notice 2 weeks before that a family is coming, and sometimes even a month. But with everything that happened, we didn't have that luxury, and sometimes we were informed when people were already on the plane. So one of the challenges that we face is housing. Housing is a challenge not only for the immigrant community, but for everybody, right, in the city. And so it's even acute when you look at the arrivals, because of the way that they arrive here. They have no credit history, they have no rental history, and you can't do a background check because they're not really in the system. Now, those are 3 things that every landlord needs to be able to rent their house to anyone. It's just the way business is done. And so normally we work with landlords that understand the reality of these arrivals. And in this case of these arrivals, we had to go through temporary housing, use hotels, which were very costly, whilst we looked around with the help of Betsy and a few other stakeholders that pushed people to commit to providing housing for them. And gradually we put all 725 arrivals into housing. But once we get them into housing, the next thing is, are there children in the family that need to go to school? One thing we never anticipated was the number of women that were going to have children at 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was just not written in the books that there would be this number. That the average age of the Afghan arrivals is about somewhere around 21 and 24. It's really young because large families, a lot of young children. The large families part was also a huge challenge because finding a 3 or 4 bedroom in the city for a family of 12 or 13. Of course, you know, there are city codes that we cannot violate. There's certain number of people that you can put in so it ended up, we saw about 74% of the Afghans staying in the city and another 26% out in the counties around because we had to go a little bit further from the city to find those large housings that could put people in them. So once there we worked with several school districts to resettle, to put the children in school. There is the Nahid Chapman School that really helped us, always helps with the transition of the children into school. But this time around, we were surprised that the Clayton School District called us for a meeting to say, how can we help? Everybody came together to support this. We even had a meeting with all the school districts to talk about the cultures that we were seeing, the age range of the children, and how the schools could collaborate. The schools district collaborated amongst themselves to integrate the children into school. And then this is where Betsy's part comes in. We start looking for work. Unlike in previous arrivals, it was usually a struggle for us to get employers, the number of employers to create job opportunities. But in this case, it was in a post-COVID world. Up till today, there's still a lot of employers calling us. We don't have enough people to fill jobs in this community. So almost everyone who arrived, I think we've had about 223 job placements in the last year. So almost everybody of adult working age that was not, handicapped in one way or another has been put to work, and in many cases also with the help of the Mosaic Project. So we do the basic, the cultural orientation so they can understand. We explain to them what it means to work in the United States, some of the habits that they need to know, prepare them for job interviews and things like that. We identify their skill sets, their level of English, because all of that enables us for our workforce department to match them with employment opportunities within the community. So you may want to talk about the job placements.
So it's very interesting because for the Afghan community, some of them, just like when we have a situation in Florida, when people get evacuated, it's everybody with high skills, medium skills, and low skills, even though there's sometimes a perception that if people come as refugees, they must somehow be not educated and low skilled. And that's not the case. They're representing many things. So the Institute, again, has a staff, 4 to 5 people who all they do is workforce placements with employers. But particularly, they're working with employers who are usually working for hourly workers. And at that time, the people from Afghanistan may not speak English very well yet, or some English. But then there were some who had transferable skills, spoke English, they worked with the military, they worked with the ministry, they worked with the economic organizations. And so in that case, they go between us because one of the programs that the St. Louis Mosaic Project runs is called our Professional Connector Program, where someone connects with us, they tell us what their skills are, and they tell us what kind of a job field, and then we match them for 1 or 2 meetings with someone in the field who can help them network. Because what I talked about in the book is the way professionals find jobs is by meeting people and then networking, and then they introduce you, and then a job opens and they say, oh, Vince, I've met with you. And then then Vince tells somebody, oh, I just met this person who was an accountant from Kabul. Maybe you have an opening, and that it works that way. So there are a number, now it's been 8 or 9, 10 of these Afghan people who had work skills, had English, and then they came through us where we helped them network and they have found jobs. So it's very rewarding. And, I can tell you I had 2 case studies I was going to mention. One of them was, and actually John Lowington knows this young man, and it was in the paper about Valley. He got resettled. He was here single. He had been an accountant at the hotel in Kabul that worked with the US military. And so, he was an accountant working with Americans, and he's got incredible stories about how the Taliban accosted him in his office and tried to take his computer. And he did escape on one of those planes. And when I met him, because part of what Mosaic does economically in our development is we know so many people, I called both the general manager of the Four Seasons and the general manager of the Ritz, whom I know. And I said, do you have any accounting openings? Young man, accounting, work with Americans. And the Ritz immediately said, yes, we just posted an accounting job. They interviewed him the next day. They made him an offer. He started working, and, it's going very well for the hotel. And the hotel is hoping that they have openings in finance. They have openings in valet. They have openings in housekeeping. They're hoping that this will lead him to help other Afghan people. So what also happens is someone like this, he's working, but he doesn't know anyone here. He's somewhat lonely. And so I called upon John and said to John, would you meet this young man and maybe have coffee or lunch with him once a month and just be a friend to him? And so John is doing that with this young man. Another one is a young man that was an engineering, he was a construction site evaluator. And again, I don't know anything about construction site evaluators. So I connected with Tom Finan, who runs our construction networking organization, and 1 or 2 of our construction companies. They met with him, and one of them was very philanthropic in seeing this young man's skill in construction. They paid for his Uber to get to their office. They gave him driving lessons. They had all their staff bring in safety clothes and safety shoes. And they have him now on a path on, construction site work. So he is now established as well. So there's this connection. There's also a program at the International Institute that they run called Career Advancement for International Professionals. And they have a program that has 6 sessions that helps those people who are getting ready for the workforce to build skills with resumes, networking, some of the job factors they're going to need. And that's something that's very important. And when they finish the program, the 6 sessions at the International Institute, they refer them over to my team of 3, where we then start to do the networking. So that's how it's worked. And then we look at people like Bob Kolf, who has a really incredible, Bob's right there in the plaid shirt. And Bob has this incredible networking with thousands of people who are job seekers and employers. He has events every month. And when people are ready, we send them to him in the community so they can start to get poise, confidence in their language, confidence with interviewing, because it's so hard. As if you were put in Beijing or Kabul or anywhere else, just imagine what it would feel like. So that's where we've been with the Afghans, with so many of them coming last year, as Ray said, about 700, which was about 180 family units, many with very large families. And when they say a large family, it often is siblings and their children, and they all have a different view of family that we might consider an immediate family, but for them, it's all one family. And so could be several working people and children, but mostly younger. So then the Ukrainians have come, and that's so different. So I'm going to let him tell you about the Ukrainians coming, and then how we're working with our Ukrainian community.
And when this year started, if we had, none of us imagined that we would have to deal with Ukrainians arriving. And here we are. We've seen about 600 Ukrainians move into the St. Louis area. At least we know that. We may not have seen them, but we know because we get a weekly update on family. So the way Ukrainians are coming, they're coming differently from the way the Afghans are coming. They're all coming in with something called humanitarian parole. But as parolees, in the case of Ukrainians, they're sponsored by families here. So a family or an individual decides to sponsor a Ukrainian family for them to come to the United States, and then they come. And unlike the case of the Afghans, we don't have to find housing for them because the sponsoring family commits to at least provide housing for them for a period of time. And so they're at least having a place where they can stay, and then they apply for their work permit. And once they get their work permit, they can integrate the workforce. But at the International Institute, we also have several programs that they have access to, that they come. So we have work incentive programs, so that we have um, programs that can help them. When I say work incentive programs, if you can prove that you are actively looking for work, we can support you for a period of time. Or if you just start a job, maybe we can give you some cash assistance for a 3-month period. But just things that that they also have access to food stamps, because they're all coming, and it's typically difficult at the beginning. So we have this different programs. With a lot of them are in our English language programs now at the Institute, because they also, not all of them can speak English. But there's a fundamental difference between the Ukrainian families. The Ukrainian families are smaller. Was the Afghans had to worry about housing and the children. The Ukrainians seem to almost ask you the very next day, when are my children starting school, or when am I going to work? It's just a different approach to this. We are providing support to already about 250 Ukrainians who are participating in our programs. But we know that there is a huge movement of Ukrainians coming into, when we look across Missouri, about 1,500. We're seeing a lot of them also go down to Springfield, Missouri, much more than even coming to St. Louis. So we're trying to figure out why. We're seeing a lot of Ukrainians in the St. Charles area, and I think because there are already Ukrainian families living in that area. Of course, we're also seeing them in the city. But now, if you walk the corridors of the International Institute now, you'll definitely be running into Ukrainians because they're coming. Now we are also seeing a change in their arrival status. We have already been notified that the next group of Ukrainians will be coming as refugees. So I think they had put a cap of 100,000 of those that could be sponsored by families. And maybe they're approaching that cap, and now they're beginning to process them as refugees. I'm just going to pause here for us to think a little bit about, because this is the World Affairs Council, to just think about the impact of the refugee crisis that we face in the world, and how it's going to affect everything that we do. We're living at a time where we have the highest number of displaced people, labeled refugees around the world, over 100 million of them. We had a big challenge in this community resettling 700 Afghans in 6 months. Now think about Romania, think about Poland, think about Slovenia and Slovakia, Moldova, those countries. Moldova, a population of about 600,000, has received over 400,000 people. The country's population has doubled within a short period of time. Those European countries are at the brink of collapse. If we are not careful, we're going to see a significant challenge in the world. And we have a moral responsibility to provide relief for this. I'm saying it's not even only for the Ukrainians. And we're going to see how this is going to affect those economies around the world. So we're doing the best that we can now, but I think that there's room for us to be able to even do more to support, especially at this really challenging times. But I just wanted to say that, because every day as we see people come here from different parts of the world, they all come, Betsy just mentioned 2 stories. They all come from different parts of the world. Their stories are the same. It's always, you know, people have to leave, go through difficult journey, and they come here, they have to start, but they come with a spirit that always puts them on the path of survival. We have an Afghan who came here a year ago, who already has an auto repair shop. He's hired two people. We just gave him a grant of $15,000, and he's going to hire 4 more people. He's setting up a second jack in his place. But that's the spirit that they come here with. Against all odds. They know that they have to play their part. They may come here as refugees, but now they are neighbors, they're taxpayers, they're employers, they're business owners, they're contributing to the development of the community. Out of that challenge, they overcome.
Yeah, I would say that, the economic asset is really important to understand what these newcomers, we have a stagnant to declining region, and that's, we need people, we need to think about keeping, jobs filled, schools open, neighborhoods by, vitality. And we don't have enough newcomers. We don't have enough of many other groups that we could talk about. And there's activity going on with other ethnic groups and different countries that we're not really talking about tonight, but we could talk about it at a later time, because we really wanted to focus tonight on Afghan and Ukrainian situations. But they're all contributing to our economy. They're here in an work authorized fashion. They're here legally, and they bring a lot of skills. Giving you 2 examples of Ukrainians that I've been working with. One is a couple that came from the Ukraine, and they both are IT technology specialists. And one of them was working for Vodafone, another for technology. And we have been networking them. And just as I was telling a few people, the wife just got a job with Charter Communication. She started on Monday, and her English is good, and she's worried, is she going to do it right, because it's so new to her. But also trying to boost people's confidence, because they're resilient, but trying to boost their confidence all the time so they feel supported is a lot of what all of us do in the World Affairs Council, the consular people, everyone. You have to boost people's confidence that being here, they're going to be successful. So I'm really happy for her. And now we're working to help her husband through all of our networks. A second is a very interesting case. A woman came who was a medical doctor. She's in her, I'd say, mid-40s. And when you come as a doctor, you just can't become a doctor here because of all, and there's, you can't become almost anything. You can't become a beautician. There's state laws, and then there's medical laws. And depending on someone's age and their ability to spend the time and money to go into a residency. But for Olga, it was not going to happen for her to go back. She was the head of a fertility clinic in Kyiv. And she came here, she married a man here who was like a physical therapist. So he has kind of a low level, not a big paying job, but she really didn't want to go into a different field. She didn't want to do something in another medical. She really wanted to work in the fertility field. So I made introductions. My husband's a doctor, and John and my husband have worked together for years. And so I know a lot of the medical people. So I called all the different medical people and said, who can you introduce her to that's in the fertility field? And, and then ultimately, I know the president of Barnes Jewish Hospital. And I said, Rich, can you make an introduction to the fertility department? Because maybe they have a entry opening for her. And they met her, and they had a med tech job opening, which again, she had been the head of the clinic. She took the med tech opening. She was thrilled to take the med tech opening. She's now training to do sonogram, over the belly testing. And then I had the most wonderful call about a month ago. She started July 1st. And then her staff, the staff of the fertility clinic for WashU, they called me, and I had only met her over Zoom, and we'd been talking and encouraging. And they said, we love Olga so much. We're going to have a surprise luncheon for her, and we're going to have Ukrainian food, and we want you to come, and we want her to know how much we support the Ukraine and her. She walked in the room. I was there. They had Ukrainian food. They had a sign up on the PowerPoint, we love you, Olga. We support the Ukraine. We wish the best for your people. She was overcome. And I was there. We all hugged. We took pictures. And it was so motivating that the department, has embraced her, and she is rising, and they're giving her some more opportunities to do more things, even though she can't be a medical doctor. But they are helping her, and she is so overjoyed to be there. And again, they had openings, she had skill, and it's helping our region. So those are the kind of stories that make it so real that we as a region can benefit as whatever way, whether people come because our government helps the Institute to get people started, or whether they're coming because, Susan and John and the Cohens decide that we'll sponsor someone and take that Ukrainian and get them going, or whether we're going to have new Ukrainians that come through the Institute. All these ways that people are coming from these countries, they're such an asset to the region, but they need us to be supportive. They need us to give them some grace to get started, and to understand that they're going to be, in general, long-term parts of our community. And if we do a good job, more will come. One of the things that RA didn't mention is that Jerry Schlichter, who's a lawyer, and some other people have put together $1.2 million to help an Afghan attraction plan through the Institute that involves a community center, a program manager, a chamber of commerce for Afghans, an Afghan newspaper, some sports activities, children, computers, because we have a chance, if we do a good job, to maybe attract secondary people. And they've already had 50 or 60 or more from other cities that said, hey, St. Louis is doing a good job. Why don't we go there? And so those are the things that we as a region can do if we're, thinking in a bigger way. We could think bigger. We could do bigger things if we had money for housing, money for more jobs, money for more welcoming activities. But we're doing a lot, but we could be doing more. And there are weak spots that we have, of course. So those are some of the final things. I will say that the motivation to use the knowledge that all of us have gained helping people find jobs is what motivated me to write the book, Welcome to the USA, You're Hired, a guide for foreign-born people seeking jobs. When I was at home, before I got vaccinated, I was posting a lot on LinkedIn with my work, and people said, put your tips in a book. It's hard to find them on LinkedIn. So between March and September last year, I wrote the book. It was launched on Citizenship Day a year ago. And between the region and nationwide, there were contributors to the chapters on refugees from the International Institute. There's a chapter on international students. There's one on the spouses that get moved here and their partners. What happens? How do you go into a company? With a lot of thoughts that I had from my experience at Nestle, as well as others that I've watched. So had about a dozen local and national contributors to the book. And it's been very rewarding because the goal is to put the knowledge out there so that these job seekers will get a better job faster and help themselves, help our economy. And then a lot of HR people have been interested, and I've spoken at SHRM and a lot of HR organizations, because they want to know if they're hiring people, how can they do a better job and be a preferred employer? So we work with a lot of employers, and they're using the book. And I'm thinking about doing some sort of a booklet or pamphlet with the tips for the employers trying to hire these people, because that's something that we get asked a lot of questions. So I do have books if anyone wants to buy one, or you can get them on Amazon, or I have some here that I can sign for you. Happy to. And if you know someone that would benefit from it on the hiring side or on the using it side, Bob has given them out to a number of the people that he works with. But my real mission was to get the knowledge out there. And I really felt personally passionate to make that happen, and invested in the book on my own with the blessing of the Economic Development Partnership, because a lot of the book highlights what we in St. Louis have done to be welcoming. And when I talk about it on a national level, I'm highlighting us and what we've done well. And so it's a good reflection on St. Louis. So maybe you have some final remarks, and we'll take questions. And maybe, John, if you have any further questions, you can think about that. But Ray, do you have any final thoughts about this whole mission with your large staff and how passionate they are? And I know this woman over here is one of your volunteers, and a number of people here are part of the many volunteers. And you have really brought a lot of community groups together, because how can we do this without a whole community? So you really had a different model of bringing a lot of people together very quickly that you might address.
Yeah, we've only been successful because of the community. We saw the community response once the word came out that the Afghans were moving to the United States, and we embraced that, the community, and created opportunities for other community-based organizations to be involved in the process. I think the word welcome is something that is really vital, because once people arrive a place, the way that they are welcomed in that place determines, those first impressions last forever. They will tell this to their children and their children's children. And as a community, we see ourselves, our role is really working together with the community to make St. Louis welcoming, and not only welcoming to those who arrive here as refugees, but for that secondary migration. We've seen 41 families move into the St. Louis area after the wave of arrivals. Over 131 people now that have are moving, and we hope that this dynamics is going to continue. Going forward, we may not have a wave of Afghans coming or a wave of Ukrainians, but we have a community that is in need of these populations. We get about 140 calls every week for employment opportunities that we cannot fill, because the restaurants are closing down, small businesses are in need of populations of labor. So it's only by making St. Louis attractive. I know the marketing that is being done, but from the stories that other immigrants tell about how we welcome them, we're going to see a movement, and that's the work that we hope to do going into the future.
Thank you. Can we do a round of applause? Thank you. Do you have any questions? So I'm going to grab the microphone if you'll hold your hand up so that people, who has a question? I have a quick comment. Valley wanted to be here tonight, but guess what? He's on a Ritz corporate training program in Chicago. How about that? Nice story.
Oh, wow.
It makes me go good.
I'm sure you all have questions because there's, you must have questions about how this is affecting all of us.
I'm just curious geographically where these groups are. Where are the Bosnians and where are the other communities in the city that you're setting up?
I think geographically, the Bosnians started out in the south county, but that community has grown, and the Bosnians are now like everywhere, but basically down in the south. Now, in the case of the Afghans, of course, we because of the speed at which they were arriving, we had to take every opportunity that came our way. So they're really spread all over the city. There are about 8 or 7 zip codes. So if you look at around that 63117 to 63123, around that number, they're around those 6-7 zip codes in high concentration, but they're all over. We try as much as possible to put people first close to the International Institute campus because they have services. We put them close to the bus routes because they don't come here with cars. And we look at the schools and how the schools can support them. But in the case of the Afghans, we really had to spread out. We have people up in North County. We have some families out in St. Charles, in the Baldwin area, especially the larger families, because just capacity within the city.
And the Ukrainians are all over, mostly higher percentage in the county, because they're going with families who could afford to support them personally. And that's happening more in the counties than in the city.
Okay. Question I have, kind of an obvious question here, is that St. Louis and a lot of other, especially Midwestern cities, being in such a dire situation, losing population. We have this huge infrastructure and all this stuff, but not much population, or they're leaving. What would it take to open the floodgates and have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees coming? And have any other cities had success in opening these floodgates?
Yes. Let me. I mean, it has to be a series of things. I don't know that there is one thing that we need to do. It has to be a series of things. The community has to be deliberate around providing holistic support that would encourage people to move here. There are incentives that maybe policy and politics can drive, but housing is vital for the city of St. Louis. I'm not talking about the suburbs, like the city of St. Louis. We really need to grow the city of St. Louis.
But there was lobbying done with Anthony Blinken, with our senators, and we have lobbied for more people. I mean, so there has been an active request for the allocation, but lots of other places want refugees too. So you just can't say send more here. We have, we've gone down that road. We've worked in that. So we are working with a lot of angles, but you can't just raise your hand and have them arrive. So that's why this idea of building a plan for secondary migration is important. But also again, it's not the topic of tonight, but we have some work going on with Hispanic attraction through the Mosaic Project. We're working on something, our number one largest foreign-born population in our region, you'd be surprised. Number one is our Indian population. Number two is Mexican. 3, Chinese. 4th, Bosnian. And the Bosnian is not growing. They came, they're here. That's not the future. So we are working on attraction plans that we have in place for Hispanic tied to our workforce. And also we are now in the beginning of something about attracting more Indian people here. Again, many of whom are going to have higher education, higher skills. And what will that take? So we're building plans for that as well, because you can't just find one pathway. I will also say this region is 95%, the metro, 2.8 million. We are 95% native born. We are 5% foreign. So we as a region, we're not yet doing what we should be for the 95%. And if we were doing better for the 95% and growing that, it's easier to attract foreign born. So you can't just say, get more foreign born to stop the decline. We really need to also do the focus and the hard work on our native born Black and white populations. And so the places like Indianapolis, Nashville, if they're growing their base population, it's easier to attract foreign born. But we are sliding and we can't solve it with immigration. It's only a little piece. So we need everything to work. Barb?
What is the current situation with wanting to get out of Ukraine? They able to, or individuals having to have secondary stops in Poland and various other places?
So all the people who are coming here are not coming directly from Ukraine. They're coming from a third country. A lot of them are coming through Poland, Romania, and all those frontline countries, so to speak, because it's hard for them to fly out. You can't fly out of Ukraine to
If you want to look, you can go to welcome.us. If you go to welcome.us, the website welcome.us, you will see all the activity of how you request sponsorship of Ukrainian or now Venezuelan. So they've got a lot of information there, but they have to get out of the country and then try and figure out how to get here. Yeah. In the western part, they're getting out. The men were not allowed to leave because they want them for military.
I'm going to take one last question from Susan Law.
Well, thank you both. This has been a great presentation and great information. I guess my question is, what can the people in this room do to help you, each of you, in helping refugees and immigrants in the city?
So the question from Susan is, how can you all help? Well, certainly there are many opportunities at the International Institute that Array can speak to about how there are many avenues on their website and many ways that he can speak to. From the Mosaic Project, letting me know if you can be a professional connector, letting me know if you'd like to be a buddy to someone, letting me know if you'd like to be in our women's program where we have local women matched with international women to kind of have a friendship program. They're more personal, but again, I'm a 3-person marketing organization. We're not a big staff. We don't have things that people can walk in the door of our Clayton office to do. Unlike the International Institute, that your staff is how large now? 80?
No, we're now 115.
115 people on that staff down on Arsenal Street. and a very well-developed volunteer website for one-time and multiple opportunities, from citizenship training to English to helping you help set up apartments, right? So what else? What are some of the other ways they can help?
There are significant volunteer opportunities. There's several people who have signed up to do citizenship classes, help with job interviews, help with bus transit orientation. So there are lots of opportunities to volunteer. If you just go to iistl.org, there will be opportunities for volunteering. We also have needs. Now, these families, those needs change from time to time. So we have wish lists, and this needs depending on the families that are coming. So now in the month of November, for example, we have 35 arrivals, 9 Afghans, one from Burundi, 5 Congolese, 5 Iraqis, 5 Syrian, 9 Ukrainians. So we already know that they're coming. And once we know the coming family size, we begin to determine what will be the needs. And so our wish list continues to change depending on what, not wish list, you could order something from Amazon. So diapers, for example, are always needed for families that need, it's getting cold. We need warm clothing, blankets. So you can also do that. Like every other not-for-profit organization, we're always limited in resources. So we're also always accepting donations, and these donations, we have something called, we've created this fund, and this fund, anything that goes to that fund goes to support the refugees when they come to the United States. So those are some ways in which, but even more importantly, just really become ambassadors of the work that we do, and speak about this to your neighbors. Everybody can play a part in this effort.
Yeah.
Was desperate.
And I would say the World Trade Center, the Mosaic is a program of the World Trade Center St. Louis, which is also a nonprofit. And we do have a number of people who donate to the work that we're doing to attract people and to work with the programs we have. And we're always very appreciative of that as well. So, we don't compete with the agencies, but there are a lot of people who do want to support our attraction activities, and that's very valuable and appreciated. Yes, Lucy.
I'm interested in what you're doing to attract new landlords.
So one of the things that we did, and Betsy did mention this fund, this financial support that we got from Jerry Slick and a number of other people. And we basically created a fund, a housing fund. And we have money that has been set aside that helps us to be able to provide guarantees to landlords that these tenants will be able to pay their rents, right? So there, in several cases, we prefer to do a bulk co-lease. So a tenant that has, like, I think there's a building called Heritage, Heritage Homes downtown, where they have about 52 apartments. It's easier for us to sign co-sign a lease like that for many apartments. And so we put those families there. We have really seen that by the time they're getting to the 4th or 5th month, they are able to pay their rents themselves. But landlords don't know that, right? Landlords, we have to find a way to show the landlords that no, we're working with them. They should get a job. They will be able to pay their bills. So we're co-signing. And once we started doing that, we had many more opportunities of landlords that provided a rental housing for them.
Make love, not war. As I said, I'm going to have to tie it up there because the food's about to arrive for the group here. Thank you for those that have been online. There's a closing words from the president of the World Affairs Council, Pierce Powers.
Well, I love to see this collaboration. I'm the president of the World Affairs Council, and I guess my company's the host here tonight, and we're packed to the rafters. I will tell you, we have a filtration system we installed right after COVID. 99.7%, it's like an operating room. So feel safe, please. It's really a very safe place to be. It's important, but you know, I just returned from Europe and this whole thing was arranged. I saw a lot of Ukrainians, actually. They were on the Viking cruise ship. Beautiful, beautiful people. So the collaboration of our international groups, sometimes it's very confusing. We are the not-for-profit that, amongst other things, brings through the State Department visitors here. Susan Lord heads that up. She's on our board. I was in this room, I guess you were in Portugal at the time, and we had a group from Portugal. We sat around here, and of all people, Lal Carson-By, the CEO of Emerson, came, and Akbaret, who heads PR, and these energetic Portuguese, and Lal was really into it. He told his story of how he got to St. Louis and on and on and on. So the question all the way around the table was, how do we get to St. Louis? How do we move here? How can we get here? And as it was all coming to a conclusion, I think there were 14 of them. I said, so you're here in St. Louis, you've gone to Washington, D.C., you're here, and I think they were going to Seattle, maybe. And I said, had you ever heard of St. Louis before you got here? No, none of them had. So that's what we do. We connect St. Louis to the world as we bring these visitors in, and it's so important. So think about joining our organization if you're not already a member. Vince is a member. Betsy's a member. It's all wonderful. I think that's really it. Just welcome to all. I don't know the whole story on how the food works, but I think in buying the meals, we're supporting the Afghan through.
So there's a different nonprofit called Welcome Neighbor, and they have many activities, and they've been teaching a lot of the international women how to use their cooking skills to form micro businesses. And they work out of the food incubator that's over in the Central West End in their homes, and they've gone through food safe certification for the quality and the safety standards on the food. And they get most of the money to those women as part of what they do. And that's the food that you have procured today. So it supports those women.
So
Can I just add to what you said? Welcome Neighbors.
Yeah.
People who are asking what they can do. Welcome Neighbors. We were just at a meeting last night. They form groups of 6 or 8 people who then pair with a family. It's people that you're bringing in as refugees, right? And then they're facilitating their resettlements, working with the international
Yeah, so look
institute.
up Welcome
That's a way
Neighbor.
you can
Yep,
easily
help
get involved
Welcome Neighbor.
with friends.
Yep.
And they're on,
Yes,
they've got a
several
website.
others. Welcome Neighbor,
that's in-
Oasis International.
Yes,
We've been
House of
working
Goods. We
together,
work with
House
all
of
these
Goods.
groups and collaborate and have all of them. be
And I get a
helpful.
commission on every one of them.
You do.
Welcome Neighbors.
There's somebody, can you get the camera over here? Anyway, I'm gonna close it out now. Thank you to Betsy and Ari. It's been just fascinating. You didn't know all of this? Thank you, those online. Hope to see you again. Sign up for the next one. Thank you.